It started with a stroke. Not a major one. At least that's what the ER doctor said when I rushed in with my sweater half on and my badge still clipped to my blouse. They called it a warning stroke. A small blockage, something treatable, manageable, if you changed a few things. Diet, stress, medication. But I saw the look in my father's eyes when they wheeled him in, slumped on one side, his mouth unable to form the word yes, even though he was nodding. There's nothing small about watching your only parent look that fragile. Dad had been living alone in Spokane since Mom died, almost 7 years earlier. He was stubborn, didn't want to sell the house, refused to move in with me, said it still felt like home. But after the stroke, everything shifted. I started commuting back and forth from Seattle every other weekend. I worked full-time as a paralegal, which meant long days and unpredictable cases, but I did my best. Grocery runs, medication pickups. I replaced light bulbs, cleaned out his fridge, tried not to let it show how tired I was. It was Dad who first suggested that Aunt Marianne move in, just until I get my feet under me, he said. Marianne was his younger sister by 12 years. She had lived in Oregon most of my life, but moved back to Washington after her second divorce. She'd been bouncing between rentals and part-time gigs and staying off-grid for a while, as she put it. We weren't close, but when she arrived that Friday with a duffel bag and 3 grocery totes full of vitamin supplements and herbal tea, Dad looked more relieved than I'd seen him in months. At first, it seemed like a godsend. She cooked, she kept the TV low, she refills his pillbox without being asked. She even started organizing old files, insurance paperwork, bank statements, warranty slips from microwaves we no longer owned. She said she was decluttering the energy. I didn't argue. The house needed order. But by the 3rd week, something started to feel shifted. It was subtle at first. She began answering my questions for him. I'd ask, "Dad, did the nurse come by today?" And she'd say, "He was too tired, so we canceled." I'd suggest picking up fresh fruit, and she'd say, "We're avoiding sugar now, it's inflammatory." I told myself she meant well. She was present, helpful, a little over-involved maybe, but nothing worth making a scene about. The first real red flag came during a phone call. I was at work, deep into discovery prep for a civil suit, when I got a voicemail from Dad's pharmacy. They said his prescription refill had been denied. When I called back to clarify, they said the insurance info on file had changed. I asked who authorized that. The woman hesitated, then read a name off the account. She said, "Marianne Kelly." I stared at the posted note on my desk, heart suddenly slow and heavy. Marianne hadn't mentioned updating anything, and Dad never would have thought to do that himself. That weekend, I asked her about it. She smiled like I'd just offered her tea. "Oh, I called them to straighten it out. They had the wrong address on file. It's all good now." I nodded. I didn't push, but a piece of me stayed stuck on that smile. How easy it came, how practiced it felt. The next week, I logged into Dad's Medicare portal. The password hadn't changed. The pharmacy info had. So had the billing address. It wasn't my father's house anymore. It was hers. I didn't confront her right away. I needed to be sure. I printed statements. I checked account histories. I even asked the nurse who came for his weekly blood pressure checks if Marianne had been talking about power of attorney paperwork. The nurse gave me a vague shrug. She thinks she mentioned something like that. I didn't see anything official. Neither had I. But something was happening under my feet, and I didn't know how deep it went yet. All I knew was that my aunt, the woman who had arrived with essential oils and turmeric capsules, had begun changing things. Quietly, legally, permanently. And if I didn't act soon, I might not have any say in my father's life at all. I didn't sleep well that weekend. I kept replaying every visit I'd had at the house over the past month, trying to see what I'd missed. The small things Marianne had slowly replaced. The file box where Dad kept his documents, now moved to her bedroom closet. The fridge, suddenly labeled with color-coded stickers. The living room rearranged so his recliner faced the window, not the TV. It wasn't just convenience. It was ownership. Quiet, piece by piece. I stayed late on Sunday. waited until she went to the store. She was always announcing her errands, like a character in a play. Then quietly opened her bedroom door. I didn't plan to snoop. I told myself I was just checking for that file box. But the moment I saw it on the floor, tucked beneath her dresser, I couldn't stop myself. I lifted it onto the bed and opened the lid. Inside was a stack of folders, neat, labeled, dated. Medical records, copies of recent blood work, scans, prescriptions, with notes scribbled in her slanted handwriting. Bank statements, not hers, my father's. Every account he had. And in the back, a manila envelope labeled simply POA, signed. I opened it. Inside were 2 notarized documents, one medical, one financial, both dated 2 weeks ago, both granting Marianne Kelly full authority to act on behalf of Thomas D. Lewis, my father. My throat tightened. I read the signatures again. My father's was shaky, barely legible, but it was his. Hers was sharp and steady. The notary's stamp was real, official. It had already been filed. She had done it, quietly, legally. She had made herself my father's decision-maker. When she came back 20 minutes later, I found her sitting at the kitchen table, the envelope in front of me. She paused in the doorway, plastic grocery bags in one hand. She said, "I was going to tell you." "When?" I asked. "When it felt like the right time. Your dad was confused about all the paperwork. He asked for help. I helped." "You filed power of attorney?" "Yes." "You didn't think I should be part of that?" She set the bags down gently. "I thought about it, but you're busy. You're not here every day. It was easier this way." Easier. That word stuck like a splinter. You moved his billing addresses. You changed pharmacy authorizations. I streamlined things. You changed his banking. She didn't deny it. He asked me to. He was overwhelmed. He was making mistakes. This way, it's all in one place. In your name. I'm acting on his behalf. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw someone I didn't quite recognize. Not malicious, not even manipulative in the cartoon sense, just efficient, certain, someone who believed they were right and that anyone who disagreed was an obstacle, not a person. I said, "He's my father and my brother. You live in his house. I care for him. You control everything." She held my gaze. No blinking, no retreat. She said, "You weren't here." The words hit like a slap, not because they were cruel, but because they were calculated, designed to make me feel like I had abandoned him, that she was filling a vacuum I had created. I stood up and left without another word. But I knew, the moment the door shut behind me, that she had no intention of giving that power back, and that my father, quiet, tired, and so easily overwhelmed now, wouldn't even realize how much of his life had already been signed away.
I drove back to Seattle on Sunday night with a tension in my jaw that didn't let up until halfway through the pass. I didn't turn on music. I didn't call anyone. I just gripped the wheel and let my mind replay that quiet, calculated conversation at the kitchen table. Her calm voice, my father's life sitting in a manila envelope between us, and her saying, without saying it, that she now held the reins. By Monday, I'd convinced myself I was overreacting. Marianne had always been headstrong, even as a teenager. She was the kind of person who made things happen, who didn't wait for permission. Maybe that hadn't changed. Maybe she'd seen how overwhelmed Dad was and decided to take control the only way she knew how, quickly, efficiently, without asking. But that thought didn't hold up when I logged into his old credit union account. I still had his password, and even though I hadn't used it in months, it worked. What I saw wasn't just activity. It was a pattern. Repeated withdrawals in the same round number, $1,200, always on a Friday, sometimes twice in 1 week. The last entry was a large transfer, labeled with a routing number I didn't recognize. Not a bill, not a medical expense. Just a generic memo line. Settlement. My chest tightened. I picked up the phone and started making calls. I kept my voice calm, polite. I told the customer service reps I was calling on behalf of my father, that I had questions about recent changes. Some asked for verification codes, some stonewalled me completely. But a few, either new to the job or too tired to enforce boundaries, gave me just enough to put the pieces together. The bank had updated his primary contact the week after Marianne moved in. The pension office had mailed his last 2 statements to a different address. Not Dad's home address, but a P.O. box in Eugene, Oregon. She hadn't just taken over his accounts. She'd rerouted the trail. That night, I sat on my couch, surrounded by printed emails, browser tabs, and half a yellow legal pad of notes. It felt familiar in the worst way, like being deep in a discovery case, digging into documents and timelines, except this wasn't a case file. It was my father's life, and it was slowly being peeled away from me, line by line. I remembered something then, something that hadn't made sense at the time. During one of my last weekend visits, I'd seen an Amazon package arrive. My dad never ordered online. I brought it inside and set it on the table, and when I asked Marianne what it was, she said, just some supplements. But now I wondered, supplements weren't shipped in boxes that size. I also remembered the new bathroom sink faucet, modern, brushed nickel. The floors had been replaced in the hallway. I hadn't thought much of it then, just assumed maybe Dad had dipped into his savings. But now it seemed like something else. Home improvements for a house she might have already started thinking of as hers. Still, I hesitated to act. Reporting this, even opening that door, would mean formally accusing my aunt of elder exploitation, a felony in the state of Washington. The same woman who had, just a few weeks ago, stood over the stove stirring lentil soup for my dad, checking his temperature, reminding him to drink more water. I called Cynthia Cho, the estate attorney I used to assist. She was brisk but kind. "Do you think your father was competent when he signed the POA?" she asked. "I don't know. He seemed tired, confused sometimes, but he didn't seem gone." There's a difference between appearing functional and understanding what you're signing. Did he ask questions about it? I wasn't there. I didn't know it was happening. Cynthia exhaled softly. "You'll need a geriatric capacity assessment from an independent doctor, and you'll want to freeze the accounts if you suspect money's been moved." "I don't have POA." "Then you need to go through APS or petition the court. It's a mess, but it's not impossible." I thanked her and hung up. I didn't write anything down right away. I just sat there, in silence. The legal side, I could navigate. The paperwork, the statutes, the options, I could handle that. But what I couldn't process was how fast it had all happened. Marianne had only been there 6 weeks. In that time, she'd gone from caregiver to controller, from sister to sole decision-maker. And my father didn't even realize it. Or worse, he did. And he just didn't have the strength to fight. I drove back to Spokane early on a Friday morning. I told no one I was coming. I didn't want to give Marianne time to prepare, to tuck papers away or script some explanation for what I already suspected. I parked 2 blocks from the house and walked the rest of the way with a paper bag of groceries in one arm, as if I was just passing through. Daughter on a routine check-in, nothing more. The house looked the same from the outside. Same cracked walkway, same faded porch light. But inside, things had shifted again. The entryway smelled faintly of candles, not the beeswax kind Dad used to keep in emergencies, but perfumed ones. Expensive.
I noticed right away that the family photos on the living room wall had been rearranged. My mother's portrait was gone. In its place was a woven print of a landscape I didn't recognize. The space didn't feel like his anymore. I found him sitting in his chair, blanket over his knees, eyes heavy with whatever afternoon meds she'd probably given him. He smiled when he saw me, but it was delayed, like his mind had to jog forward first. "Hey, sweetheart," he said, voice soft. I leaned down, hugged him lightly. "How are you feeling?" "Tired." "Has the nurse been coming?" He nodded. "Twice this week. She says I'm doing better." "Have you been taking your meds?" He pointed to a pill organizer on the table. It was filled neatly, days labeled. I picked it up and inspected the compartments. Nothing out of place. But I didn't trust the neatness anymore. I'd learned that the more in control things looked, the more carefully something was being hidden underneath. Marianne came in from the backyard 10 minutes later, gardening gloves on, dirt streaked across her wrist. She smiled like my visit was a pleasant surprise, not a threat, not an audit. "You didn't say you were coming," she said. "I wanted to check on Dad." "He's fine," she replied, slipping off her gloves. "I just gave him tea and his second dose. He's been resting better since I adjusted the timing." I tilted my head. "You adjusted it?" She didn't flinch. "His evenings were too restless." I spoke to the nurse. "I'd like to talk to the nurse myself," I said. She paused. Just a half second. "Of course. She comes Monday and Thursday now." I nodded, pretending to accept it. That night, I stayed in my old bedroom, the guest room, technically, stripped of its teenage clutter, converted into a quiet holding space for my occasional visits. I didn't unpack. I didn't sleep much either. At 1:20 a.m., I slipped out of bed and moved silently down the hallway, barefoot. I wasn't there to confront. I was there to see. Her door was closed, light still on beneath it. I stepped past, careful not to make the floorboards creak, and turned toward the office, Dad's old workspace, which I hadn't seen in weeks. The door was open. Inside, the filing cabinet was locked, but a box set on the desk. I lifted the lid slowly. Inside were envelopes, forms, folders. Some were familiar, utility bills, medical records, but tucked at the bottom was a small notebook, the kind sold in dollar bins, spiral-bound. Inside, I found a list, handwritten. Bank accounts, dates, balances, withdrawals. I flipped further. Applied for transfer USPS pension. Medicare redirect. Finalized. HDA. Taken from backup fund. Still no email access. I stopped there. She had written my former boss's name. Cynthia Cho. She'd contacted her, or at least planned to. Had she known I worked under her? Had she forgotten? Or was she trying to pose as me? I snapped a photo of the page with my phone. My hands shook, but I stayed focused. Then I heard footsteps. I closed the notebook, shut the lid. By the time Marianne appeared in the doorway, I had repositioned myself at the bookshelf, fingers idly grazing a row of old medical encyclopedias. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked. "Just looking for something to read." She leaned against the doorframe. Her expression didn't waver, but something in her tone sharpened just slightly. "Dad needs to rest tomorrow. Maybe don't bring up anything too heavy." "Like what?" "You know, legal stuff. You worry him." I didn't reply. I let the silence work for me. She left a moment later, and I knew then she was watching me too. Whatever I planned next, I'd have to move carefully.
because the woman in that house wasn't just managing my father's care. She was rewriting the story of his life, line by line, dollar by dollar, while he sat unaware, grateful, half asleep in his chair.
I drove straight to the courthouse the following Monday morning, file folder in hand, copies of everything I'd printed, photographed, or annotated. The line outside Adult Protective Services moved slowly. Inside, the air was too cold and the chairs too close. I sat for nearly an hour before my name was called. The intake worker was polite, but distracted, fingers flying across a keyboard as I spoke. She asked for specifics. What did I suspect? How long had it been going on? Had there been physical neglect? Any signs of injury or harm? No, I said. Nothing visible. She's careful. Financial control? Yes. She's rerouted his pension. She changed his pharmacy, his address, even the house. She has POA. She spends from his accounts. The woman looked up. Was the power of attorney signed willingly? I hesitated. He signed it. I don't think he knew what it meant. Was he declared incompetent at the time? No. Has he expressed concern? No, I admitted. And even saying that felt like a betrayal of something I couldn't define. The woman gave a half nod. Not unsympathetic, just tired. She handed me a form. We'll open an initial investigation. If we determine there's credible concern, someone will conduct a wellness check. How long? Could be a few days, could be 2 weeks. 2 weeks? It didn't feel like enough, and it didn't feel like fast enough. That night, I called Dad from my apartment in Seattle. He answered on the second ring, voice groggy. I tried to sound light. Hey, I just wanted to hear your voice. He chuckled, barely. Still here. Can I ask you something? Sure. When Marianne gave you the power of attorney papers, did you read them? There was a pause. She said it was in case I got worse. I didn't want to be a burden. You're not a burden. She's been helping. I can tell she cares. She's also moved your money, Dad. She's controlling everything. Do you know that? I trust her. That was all he said. Not defensive, not angry, just quiet, resolute. I didn't know how to push past that. Because to him, I sounded like the paranoid daughter who only visited on weekends and asked too many questions. Marianne was the one who cooked, who cleaned, who sat with him during appointments and brought him warm tea in a mug with a cork handle. She was present, and presence, I realized, bought loyalty, even when it came at a price. A week later, I got a call from the APS investigator. She had gone to the house, spoken with both of them, observed the conditions. Everything looked normal. Clean home, medications properly stored, no signs of neglect or distress. What about the accounts? I asked. That's not our purview unless we have proof of exploitation. Do you have receipts? Transfers? Anything signed? I have photos, notebook entries. Are they dated? No. I'm sorry. We'd need more. That call ended in the kind of quiet that lingers. I sat on my couch afterward, phone still in hand, and felt the weight of something I hadn't considered. Sometimes people don't want to be saved, not because they're blind, but because the version of the truth they're living in feels safer than starting over. My father had chosen comfort, familiarity, the illusion of order, even if the cost was everything he owned. I drove back to Spokane the next Saturday. This time, I didn't arrive unannounced. I called ahead, kept my voice even, and told Marianne I wanted to spend a full day with Dad, just the two of us. She agreed, though I could hear something guarded in her tone. She knew. When I arrived, she greeted me on the porch with her usual practiced calm. She offered coffee. I declined. She mentioned Dad was in the living room watching the news. I thanked her. We stood in the doorway for a moment, just long enough for something unsaid to pass between us. "I'd like to talk later," I said. "Of course," she replied. I sat with Dad for nearly 2 hours. We watched local coverage of a wildfire out in Okanogan County. He dozed off twice. I helped him to the bathroom once. He seemed small, smaller than I remembered. He used to fill a room, not just with size, but presence. Now he felt like a shadow. Not gone, not fading, but thinned out. Every once in a while, he'd say something thoughtful, something sharp. It gave me hope, but it also made me angry. Angry that someone had used his slow fade to bend his life into a version that served them. That afternoon, I asked Marianne to sit down at the kitchen table with me. I brought my folder with me this time. "I want to be clear about something," I said. "This isn't a fight. I'm not here to yell. But I need answers, and I'm not leaving without them." She folded her hands in front of her. Perfectly calm, perfectly still. "I found the notebook," I said. She didn't react. "I saw the bank transfers, the redirected pension payments, the P.O. box in Oregon. I know what you're doing." She nodded slowly. "Then why ask?" "Because I want to hear you say it." Marianne looked past me for a moment, out the window above the sink. It was late afternoon, sunlight casting soft light through the leaves. She took a breath. "I didn't plan it. Not at first." "You moved fast for someone with no plan." She gave a soft, humorless smile. "You think it takes years to lose everything? Try living on Social Security in a city where rent rises faster than breath. Try paying for a root canal without insurance. Try watching your savings evaporate because one of your kids co-signed on a loan and disappeared. You used Dad. I took care of him. You took from him. I do take care of him." Her voice rose slightly, but not with anger, with conviction. She believed it. That's what stunned me most. I'm the one who's here. I'm the one who feeds him, who dresses him when his hands don't work, who calls the nurse when he forgets what day it is. I get him out of bed. I get him through the day. That doesn't entitle you to his life. I'm not taking his life. I'm saving it, piece by piece. Every dollar I move, every bill I pay, that's one less mistake he can make. You don't see how confused he gets when he opens a bill. You don't see how long he stares at it like the numbers might rearrange themselves. I didn't respond right away. I didn't need to. Because she was unraveling, sentence by sentence exposing a logic so warped it had started to look rational from the inside. "You're siphoning money to a personal account. Because I'm behind. Because no one helps people like me. Because I've never had a fallback plan. And now I do." He's not a fallback plan. He's family. She said it like that made it okay. I opened the folder and pulled out the printouts. The bank transfers, the pension routing info, the notes from her notebook. I didn't need to say anything. I just placed them gently in front of her. I filed a report with APS. They've already been here once. They'll come again. Her face went pale, just for a second. Then the composure returned. "You really want to do that to him?" "I'm not doing it to him. I'm doing it for him." She stood slowly, gathered the papers, didn't tear them, didn't toss them, just stacked them quietly and walked to her bedroom without another word. I stayed one more night. When I left Sunday morning, her car was gone. The front closet was half empty. The house felt hollow again. Still, but not peaceful. I found my father sitting by the window, looking at the bird feeder. He said she was going to visit someone. I nodded. She left a note, said you'd explain it better than she could. I will. He looked up at me then, eyes tired but not confused. For the first time in weeks, maybe months, he seemed clear. Did she do something wrong? I sat down beside him. Yes, I said, but we can fix it. I stayed in Spokane for the next 10 days. I cleared my calendar, handed off my caseload, and moved into the guest room with 2 duffel bags and a small printer. There was no dramatic fallout, no police reports or handcuffs. Marianne didn't return. she didn't call. She didn't fight. Instead, she disappeared with the same quiet precision she had arrived with, careful, controlled, and without apology. The first thing I did was meet with Dad's primary care physician. I requested a capacity evaluation and insisted on a neutral third-party specialist. It took 5 days to schedule. In that time, I handled his medications myself, met with the nurse, and combed through every bill and statement I could find. The second thing I did was hire a financial advisor. Not for me, but for Dad. Someone local, someone who could watch his accounts without getting emotionally involved. We moved the bulk of his savings into a managed trust under a new POA agreement, this time signed with full medical oversight and a witness from the state. I didn't rush it. I sat with Dad, read every line aloud, and asked him after each page if he understood. He did. "I trust you," he said at the end, "not because you're my daughter, because you waited to let me see it for myself." I think that was the moment I stopped being angry. I'd spent weeks walking around with a furnace burning in my chest, the sense that someone had stolen from him, and by extension from me, that she had violated a bond, that she had taken something sacred and turned it into leverage. But in that moment, sitting at his kitchen table, I realized it wasn't just about what she took. It was about what he'd been willing to give. When people are tired, they reach for whoever is nearest. Sometimes the one who shows up every day seems safer than the one who means well from a distance. Marianne hadn't just exploited a man's bank account. She had filled a role, slowly, subtly, until no one questioned it, not even him. It took me weeks to undo the paperwork, months to rebuild the safeguards. Some things we couldn't get back. A portion of his pension was gone, so was a savings account he didn't remember opening. But the house was secure, his healthcare was restructured, and the nurse returned to her regular schedule. And I stayed. At first, just for a while. Then longer. Eventually, I arranged to work remotely. Not forever, but long enough. Long enough to build something new. Not control, not supervision, just presence. Dad got stronger. Not dramatically, but enough to hold conversations again without trailing off. He'd eat full meals. He started watching baseball again, asking about scores, shouting at the Mariners like he used to. It was enough, more than I expected. One afternoon in late spring, we sat on the porch. I brought him a glass of iced tea, and he held it in both hands like it was precious. He looked at me and said, "You know, she wasn't all bad." I nodded. "I know. She was scared. She still took too much. People do that when they think the world owes them something." She never asked. "No," he said, taking a sip. We didn't speak after that for a while. We just sat. He died 6 months later, peacefully, in his bed. No pain, no confusion. He left the house to me. Not because I asked, not because of the paperwork, because I stayed. That fall, I boxed up the rest of his belongings. I found the photo of my mother in the back of a drawer, dusted it off, and rehung it in the hallway where it used to be. The house didn't feel like mine yet, but it didn't feel like hers either. It felt like a life I had rescued just in time. Not from fire, not from violence. From erosion. From the kind of slow takeover that hides itself in the language of help.